So what I'm going to do today is go through what I consider is the top 5 benefits and features for each of our equipment offerings in the aquatics industry or in our aquatic segment. And again, these are my talking points that I usually take out. It's not the end all be all list, and there's a whole host of other things that we can talk about each of our pieces of equipment. But that being said, I think this is just kind of a good primer and a good way to get started. Now, this presentation is available off the website. It's being recorded, and if you like, you can go back to that, take some more notes of what you don't get off of this presentation, because I will be going a little bit fast. And so it will probably be a good thing to go ahead and review this information at least once, if not multiple times, in order to try to digest and make some of this information your own. So with that being said, let's move on here. So the first thing I like to do with Prominent USA, Prominent as a brand within the aquatics industry isn't well known, at least in the US. Globally, I always make the argument that we're arguably probably the premier pool equipment provider for disinfection equipment globally, not in the US. And so a lot of people say, well, who is Prominent? Where did they come from? What do they know about aquatics? And so I usually touch on these points during my conversations when that topic does come up, is that I explain to them that Prominent has been a global presence since 1960. I also make a point of saying that our products have been featured at every summer Olympic competition pool since 1972 Munich, with the exception of Atlanta and Los Angeles, and that's simply because we didn't have a U.S. presence at that time. And then all of our products are made in-house. We do a fabulous job of not outsourcing, which gives us incredible QC control over materials and processes, so we get a super high quality product out there at a very, very competitive price. So all these things go forward to try to build in some comfort level with the Prominent branding in the US. I also mentioned, and this isn't on the screen, that for all practical intents and purposes, we have a very powerful, long, positive track record in municipal and industrial applications, and it's only in aquatics that we're kind of the new kid on the block. And in reality, we're not. It's just that people didn't know about us. And so we've been in the US aquatics market for about 3 years now. So what we'll do now is we'll go through each one of our product lines and just kind of highlight 5 benefits and features that make great jumping off points for giving presentations and also the solution selling that I talked about. So with our chemical pumps, there's some things that I like to highlight. Our chemical pumps in the aquatics industry suffer from the reputation of a competitor. That competitor is LMI. LMI, many years ago, was a decent pump, but through cost controls and whatever other reasons internally, the pump became to be not so much a great pump, and people experience with LMI is less than positive. Since we utilize the same principle of pumping, which is positive displacement diaphragm pumps, is people automatically lump us in with the LMI pumps. And I always hit that head on, saying that, yes, we work on the same principle of moving fluid through our pumps, but that's where all similarities end, is that our pump is designed differently, and our pump has different materials that are being used. And so I stress how high quality our materials are and that they're actually machined. There's nothing molded on the active part of the pump that actually moves fluid. The pump heads on here are CNC machined out of solid billet material. They're not molded, and therefore they're a lot stronger, more durable. Our diaphragm by design is low travel, so we don't get as much wear when that diaphragm flexes. And I always tell people that are familiar with LMI, you can hear that difference in when our pump is pumping versus when an LMI is pumping. The LMI actually has a bang to it. Bang, bang, bang. whereas our pump has more of a squish. It's more of a, you hear a fluid moving through the pump, and it's not anywhere near as loud. And that low travel diaphragm means less wear on the diaphragm and a longer lasting diaphragm. We also have an auto degassing design, which allows us to go ahead and not need a 4-function valve. So we have one less moving part, one less accessory that we have to add to our pumps. So again, I'm not going to go into the details of how the auto degassing is set up. Just know that we have it, and it's a talking point that we don't need the 4-function valve, and we can basically prevent any type of gas lock occurring in the pump due to just the way it's designed. This low travel diaphragm, these high quality materials, mean that we have lower maintenance on these pumps than an LMI pump, and lower maintenance actually than a Stenner pump, which is actually our biggest competitor right now. And the reason being is that on a Stenner pump, since it's a peristaltic pump, it has a peristaltic tube. That peristaltic action requires the tube to compress all the way flat and then rebound to its full round condition. Well, after a while, that tube loses the elasticity, and that tube does not rebound to full diameter, and so we lose pumping capacity. So it's quite possible with worn tubes in some of these pumps on pools that run a lot of product through, that they can start to have problems that imitate controller problems because the pump isn't keeping up with the requirements for dosing because it's lost some of its capability through worn tubes. So we can go ahead and tell people that we don't have that problem. Our diaphragms last a long time, and I tell people without hesitation that we have some facilities that are full-time facilities, indoor facilities, that are on over a year with the pump, and the pump is still running magnificently. And outdoor, if you're only running part of the season, it's 2, maybe even 3 seasons that you'll be able to get out of a diaphragm as long as the pump is winterized properly. All the fluids are taken out and it's rinsed and maybe even kept someplace warm. The other benefit to our pumps is that, and this is a great tie-in with our DCM controller line we're going to be talking about in a few minutes, is that the pumps actually direct connect to our DCM controllers so that we can utilize the controller PID loop. Now, what does this mean for the pump? Well, the pump is a direct plug-in into the wall at a 120 volt hot outlet that's hot all the time. You run a low voltage cable from the pump on over to the controller, and this eliminates any high voltage runs that need to be made. And then the DCM controller will not only tell the pump when to turn on, but it will also control the stroke of the pump for more precise dosing with utilizing the PID loop. Great example of the utilization of this PID in our pumps. And again, we can call this smart disinfection, smart dosing, because we're actually controlling the dosing events to a much, much higher, more precise value, so we can help eliminate overfeeds or underfeeds. And a great example of this application is there's a outdoor facility in Texas I was at late in the summer, and this facility, and I paced it off, it's probably the longest distance I've ever seen between a pump room and the pool, about 350 yards. And so what that means is when there's a feed event being directed out of that pump room, it takes a long time for that chemical to get through all the piping and out to the pool. And then it takes a while for that to mix in the pool, and then it takes a long time for us to get water back to the mechanical room and have the controller sense that there's been a change in the chemicals based on the feed event. So there's a lag time between when the feed event starts and we start to realize that there's changes happening in the water, and the controller can respond to that. So that lag time in the past had caused a lot of overfeed events. And so with the PID now, we can more precisely modulate that feed event, and we've almost eliminated any overfeed situations off of that pool. So it's been a huge tool for this operator to use the PID loop and our pumps connected to our controllers. So moving on, I'd like to highlight our sensors a bit. And this is an important thing to talk about too, because from an operator standpoint, what are they looking for? They're looking for accuracy and longevity and ease of maintenance. So these are 3 things that are really important to an operator. talking about our ORP and pH sensors first, is that these sensors are a cousin, or you want to call it an analog, to the old Strantrol ORP and pH sensors. Those Strantrol sensors in the aquatics industry, the Strantrol sensors are considered the gold standard of pH and ORP sensors because of their accuracy, their incredible durability, and their great warranty. So we had the opportunity to bring in over one of the old Strantrol engineers that was laid off, and so we brought him into our group at Prominent, and he helped us design a sensor that's exactly the same. It has different form factor, it looks differently, but at the same time it has all the performance characteristics, the longevity of the old Strantrol sensors. So our pH and ORP sensors feature a 2-year warranty, which is amazing because most of our competition has a 1-year warranty, and quite frequently the sensors are going to be 6-month sensors. Moving on, I think of all the points we need to talk about as somebody going out into the field and talking about the benefits and features of our controllers, we need to talk about free chlorine. Again, talking about smart disinfection, smart application of chemicals, precise application to the chemicals to the water. There's no better way right now than I think than to monitor and control a pool by free chlorine. Now, what does that look like and why is that different than ORP? I'll spend a minute on this. Is that ORP does not control chlorine content or the chlorine amount in the water. It's controlling an ORP value. And sometimes that'll correspond with a ppm in the water, and sometimes it doesn't. ORP controllers hold an ORP set point, and the principle is to let the chlorine part per million vary to maintain that ORP value. A free chlorine sensor, on the other hand, is going to hold a free chlorine value in the water. Now, the gold standard in the industry is the Prominent sensor, again, for free chlorine. Our free chlorine sensor is EPA approved, and it's the only chlorine sensor that has this approval rating to be used in drinking water applications without a backup wet test kit to verify the accuracy of results. To me, that's amazing. What that speaks about is the accuracy and performance reliability of the Prominent free chlorine sensor, as opposed to anybody else in the industry right now promoting free chlorine sensing for their controllers. Prominent is the world leader in amperometrics, and just, it's a long word, but what that is that these free chlorine sensors, our total chlorine sensors, are based on a principle called amperometrics, and we could do a whole presentation on that. I'll save you the gory details, but know that we're the world leader in amperometrics. We actually make sensors for other chemical controller companies, and we know sensors, amperometric sensors, better than anybody else, and that's why we have the accuracy we do. And we can sense a whole host of other water-related chemicals. So we can sense oxygen levels, ozone levels, chlorine dioxide levels, free chlorine, total chlorine, you name it. If you put it into the water, bromine, anything, we can measure that to an accurate part per million and then utilize that to control the content of the chlorine. Going back to maintenance, is that all of our probes feature a detachable cable. So those of you that are familiar with a old Strantrol sensor or some of the other chemical controller sensors, that sensor wire is actually molded into the sensor body. And so when you spin out threads that hold the sensor in place, the coax cable winds up becoming damaged and kinked. The coax hates to be kinked because what happens is that the shielding, which is critical on that coax cable, becomes compromised, and we wind up getting bad signals to the sensor. So over years, I've seen just terrible condition on these coax cables that connect the controller to the sensor. So with our detachable cable, that problem goes away. And just as a side note, even though it's not optimal, our sensors are retrofittable. They're usable on BEX controllers, Strandcode controllers, etc. So again, it's not an optimal situation, but if need be, we can go ahead and use our sensors on the other controllers. A couple minutes on the sensor flow cell is that our sensor flow cell has a couple really important features that I think we need to talk about, and this goes back to sensor accuracy also. But up front, the sensor flow cell is modular by design, so that if somebody wants to expand or contract their flow cell assembly with different sensor packs, you can go ahead and do that and just add little blocks onto the BGMA sensor assembly. Now, just to say this though, is that one of the things as a salesperson, we really don't want to tell a customer, gosh, you know, if you buy a DCM 500, you can expand this later on, because that expansion will actually cost them more money than it will if they buy that right up front, because the systems are less expensive if you buy them initially as a whole piece rather than piecemeal later on, a la carte. The flow cell is very low flow, 12 gallons an hour versus about 9 gallons a minute for the old Strantrol flow cell. And this goes back to ease of installation, because we don't need a lot of flow passing through this cell, and we don't want a lot of flow. We want a very modulated, regular, low flow coming through this sensor pack. Also, by design, this sensor pack, the modular flow cell here, the BGMA, by design modulates, it regulates flow and pressure through here by the way the water flows through. Other manufacturers don't have this fabulous design for their flow cells, and so what they wind up doing is having all these adjunct or add-on flow cell assemblies with pressure gauges and extra booster pumps and special assemblies for maintaining proper pressure and volume through the cell, where our cell, by design, by engineering, does that within its form. It's easy to clean. If you ever get some sand blow through out of a sand filter into the flow cell, you can go ahead and just undo the modules and easily rinse these out. There's small cleaning ports on the bottom that really facilitate the rinsing really nicely. The other side of this too is that the sensor flow cell is pre-assembled. With the controller, it comes pre-assembled on a backboard, and you don't get a bag of parts that you have to assemble. You have to tape each fitting up and then assemble it on site. Our systems come pre-assembled, pre-wired, ready to hang. So I think that's a big plus too for people who are looking for ease of installation. And again, the flow cell along with the sensors, although it's not an optimal situation, can be retrofittable back to certain Bex and Strantrol units. Now I'm going to spend a few minutes going through our controller line. And again, like I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, this is a condensed list based on my personal favorite topics to bring up. Each of these controllers has a whole host of things that you can talk about. And I think it's really important for you as somebody getting out into the field and talking to people about our equipment is to know all these features and understand their form, their function, how they work. And then what you do is you don't just spew all this information out to a customer. What we're doing is we're going back to the customer and again, finding out what their hot buttons are, what are their concerns, what's their pain, and then internally, you can go ahead and sort out and present on which features best help them solve their trouble. What can we do to make their life easier? And that's kind of the bottom point. So the DCM 200, one of the things that just to come straight out of the box with is there is not a controller on the market at this price point that has more features to it. Just to run through these blazingly fast, we have a built-in web-based communication, no extra cost. We got temperature, heater control. We can take a flow meter in. We got PID loops. We have direct data download via USB port. There's no other controller out on the market that has all these features at this price point. To me, it's amazing, and I'm just excited to be able to talk to people about this. The web-based communication means that within this controller, there's an HTML server built into every controller. So as long as, however we do it, if we can get this controller a connection to the internet, we assign it a IP address, and now that controller is a mini server. It's a mini website with presence out on the web. You need passwords to get into it, of course. But that being said, it's its own website sitting out there. You go to that website, and then each one of the internal points to click on the interface is its own page on that website. And so what that means to an operator is you don't need an app. You don't need software to access this thing. If you have a device, and I'll use some brand names here, iPad, a Kindle, a BlackBerry, iPhone, some type of Android device, a laptop, a desktop, an Apple, whatever you have, if that other device can get to the web, it can go to the website that is this controller, and then you can access it. That is, to me, amazing because it doesn't require software. It doesn't require app. And this is two-way communication. Many of our other competitors, you can only look to see what the controller is doing. You can't actually have two-way communication. So if you go in, you want to reset something, you want to calibrate, you want to go ahead and change a set point, an alarm value, whatever it may be, you can go ahead and do that both off the DCM 200 and the 500 easily off of any device anywhere. As I mentioned before, we have the USB data download on this. So basically you take the lid off, you go ahead and plug a USB stick into the USB port, and it auto recognizes the stick, and then you can go ahead and push a button and it'll download the data logs onto that stick, which you can pull out and then carry over to your computer, and then you can open it up and manipulate that data into graphs and logs and whatever else you want to do with it. Just be aware that there is a separate presentation that's been done, and that's accessible on our website for all the instructions of how to do the USB data download. We have the PID pump control, which I mentioned before, which is an amazing thing, again, at this level of control, but it allows us to be smart disinfection. It allows us to be very precise with how we're putting chemicals into the water. The other thing that I bring up about the web-based communication is it gives us the ability as a manufacturer and for you as a distributor to access your customers' controllers remotely, to be able to see and help them. Are they having a problem? Are they stuck somewhere? Can you recognize that there's some type of something that's gone on with the programming that needs to be changed? So this gives the customer the satisfaction or the comfort that they know that we've got their back and we don't even have to go to site in order to help them out. And I think that's really a huge point for us in favor, is that we get the online troubleshooting for them and understanding that we're there to help them out anytime that they need it. So moving on to the DCM 500, when I was compiling these points, it was difficult for me to condense this down to 5 things, because I think never in the history of aquatics has there been a controller that has so much flexibility, so much capability, and so much benefit for the user. And we don't have a one-size-fit-all with this type of controller. A lot of our competitors say, okay, this controller can do a heater, it can do a VFD, it can do chemical pumps, it can take in a flow meter. So many things are pigeonholed because the input for that outboard device, that outboard sensing device, has to go to that one spot, and it can't do anything else other than that one duty. The amazing thing about the DCM 5 series to me is the incredible flexibility that it has. What that means is that if you have an architect, a designer, if you have an end user that wants to do something special, something unique, something that nobody's ever done before, as long as they can give us a sensor for that thing that they want to watch, we can take that signal in, name that signal what it truly is, and then utilize that to make other events occur, controlled by the controller. We can send out alarms based on that event. Give you some real quick examples. Just speaking with some architects last week, is a filter pump seal leak detector. This little leak detector actually inserts and sits below a pump seal in a pump. And when water starts dripping on a failing seal, it hits the sensors and it can send a signal out. Well, we can take that signal in, call it a pump leak, and then we can go ahead and send out an alarm or alert somebody to the fact that the seal is failing on the pump. Or If we have a pump pit that's below grade, we can put flood sensors into these pits, and we can alert and alarm off. We can text, we can go ahead and email somebody, letting them know that their pump pit is in the process of flooding, and somebody better get over there pretty quick. Nobody else has this capability on their controllers. We have other facilities that are not only measuring the water temperature, but they're also measuring the air temperature in the natatorium, so that they can go ahead and keep it at that optimal 2 degrees or so difference. So if somebody has a special use, if we can find a sensor for that need, chances are we can put that into the controller and do something very valuable with it. We can control other equipment, or we can at least send out alarms. Going back to what I talked about during the sensor piece is that the ppm strategy saves chemicals. We have one large resort out in Las Vegas that have switched all their pools, about 17 of them, over to DCM5 controllers, and they're all running on ppm. They have saved this last year approximately $70,000 in chlorine costs over the previous years, all due to changing from ORP to ppm. Now, if we're using less bleach in the water, that means we're going to use less acid to modify the pH hit that the bleach gives. If we're using less acid, then we're using less bicarb to modify the alkalinity hit that suffers from the acid use. So you can see that there's direct savings here. Then there's some soft cost savings that can be gained too, because the personnel, that the hours that are required to dose the bicarb in the water. All these things tie back, and so there can be a significant chemical savings by switching over to ppm, and nobody does it better than Prominent on the ppm sensing and control. Trackster is available for the DCM 500 series, and again, there's a whole YouTube channel devoted over to Trackster. So if you need more information on that, you can gain that through Jim Mooney or myself. Happy to get that information out to you. Trackster is a software package that allows us to go ahead and manipulate data, draw graphs, and we can do something called auto polling with the Trackster system. So Trackster auto poll allows us to say, basically, I don't know if there's an upper limit, but let's say we have 30 controllers scattered across a metro area. Trackster running in the background on a computer somewhere can simultaneously watch all those controllers and reach out and grab a data packet every so often, however often you want it to, and it can pull that data into the Trackster database. That does a few things for us. It goes ahead and helps us to take electronic logs, to simultaneously watch 30 pools at the same time. Then Trackster can also go ahead and text out and email out alarms, so that if there's something occurring on one of those pools, then we can automatically send that information out and alert whomever needs to know about that. One of the other attractive things too for me with the flexibility of the DCM 500 is what we call interlocks and blocks. So traditionally, and with other controller manufacturers, in order for us to get an interlock going, we have to go ahead and hardwire something from device to device. What we can do with the DCM 500, if we take in wires that give us a signal off of an outboard device, let's say it's a VFD, let's say it's a filter controller, let's say it's an autofill system, we can go ahead and digitally provide interlocks and blocks. Give you two really quick examples on doing an interlock. Instead of hardwiring, let's say, some type of flow switch into a system as a redundant safety flow switch for preventing chemical feed when the flow in the system stops, what we can do is if we take flow meter information into the DCM 500 series and we have GPMs appearing on the screen for us, we can also tell the controller when those GPMs in the program, we can go ahead and configure it so that if the GPM goes below a certain level, we turn off the capability of the controller to pump chemical. So that acts as a redundant safety switch to the safety switch that's already built into our flow cell. That gives people peace of mind, gives us some more flexibility. Another thing we can do with the blocking, for instance, is if we have control of the autofill, and the DCM 500 can do autofill duties, If we have control of the autofill, we can tell the controller not to feed chemicals during autofill events. And let me explain why that's important. Many situations in gutter pools, we have a surge pit. When your autofill kicks into that surge pit, we go ahead and we dilute the water, that the chemically treated and heated water that's in that surge pit, with fresh water that's unheated and it's chemically balanced. It's not to what the pool wants. So that dilution will flow over to the flow cell, and it can trick the controller into thinking that, hey, I need to turn the heater on, and hey, I need to go ahead and add chemicals to the water, when you really don't. It's just the autofill event that's temporary. So what we can tell the DCM 500 to do is, if it initiates an autofill event, we can tell the controller not to allow any chemicals to feed during that autofill event. And again, we come back to the concept of smart, precise dosing of chemicals, doing things only when they're really needed, and then doing them very precisely and very well. So this is the smart disinfection, the smart control concept that we like to drive home with the prominent products. The other side of this too, and I'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to the UV section of the presentation, is that we have the ability to control UV off of this. Because we can do free chlorine and total chlorine to such a great resolution, we can go ahead and take that derived combined chlorine reading, and then we can tell a UV system to turn up, to turn down, to turn off, to turn on, and in turn this is going to have a lot of savings for the facility. And again, back to the smart disinfection, we're doing these things only when we need to and in an amount that's needed. We can also take information to a VFD. We can go ahead and take the flow meter signal that we've taken in for display, for remote display, for interlocking, and we can also send that signal over to a VFD, and then the VFD can go ahead and modulate off the gallon per minute set point that is programmed into it. Moving on, our acid fume scrubber is a new product that we released this year, and the concept behind the acid fume scrubber is to prevent equipment room corrosion that is associated so much with muriatic hydrochloric acid, with the fumes coming off those tanks. Quite frequently, and in most cases, these tanks that house the acid are not sealed. And you can't really seal a tank, because if you put a hose into a tank and you're pulling fluid out of that tank and you completely seal it without some way to equalize the pressure, you wind up collapsing that tank. And so what the acid fume scrubber does, it gives us a way to relieve, give an air brake on that to equalize pressure in a way that's going to keep the fumes from escaping into the room, but also allow that tank to equalize. So the way this works is that this is, and I'm going to pull out my little handy dandy drawing mechanism here. So down here, there could be a 3/4 inch nipple, and this will thread directly into a bung on a carboy. You could put a bulkhead fitting on here. There is a union that's supplied right here, 3/4 inch union. It allows us to break and remove the canister. So if out of the tank, the fumes will come up through here, and then within these catalytic beads here, the fumes are neutralized. So we allow air in to vent, and any fumes escaping are neutralized in these beads. These beads will turn color when consumed. So they'll go from the white color you see here to a pink color, and when the whole canister is pink, then it's time to go ahead and recharge, refill, dump those beads out, and go ahead and put a new cartridge of beads inside there. The installation is completely flexible, so we can put these on the top of a tank or a carboy. We can also wall mount this. There's a wall mount kit that's an additional option, and then that's a fiberglass reinforced strut with a plastic clamp, and we can go ahead and clamp this to a wall and then feed down to the tanks utilizing PVC and fast type connection. They're refillable. Again, these are cost effective. $500 list price on these. These are much simpler, much cheaper than anything that else is out on the market. We're seeing fan assembly systems. We're seeing dilution tanks, neutralizing water tanks, where the fumes are actually pulled underwater and neutralized by bubbling the acid fumes through a neutralizing solution. Some very complex solutions, very expensive. Trying to vent a room utilizing a fan can be very expensive. You have all the ductwork, and then the fan itself burns out because many times, instead of pressurizing the room, they're putting a vacuum on these rooms, pulling the acid fumes past the fan, and the fan goes out in a year or two. They have to replace that. So again, within 1 year, you basically paid for this system. Very compact footprint. We're looking at about 4 inches in diameter by about 10 inches high. So they're not heavy, very compact, and very, very cost-effective solution for getting rid of the fumes in a acid room. One of the products I'm probably most excited about is the Dulcadose A ultraviolet systems. Just a quick little bit of background on here is that in the pool industry, we really have 2 dosing set points that we want to pay attention to. We have a lower dose, that's a disinfection dose, and we have a higher dose that is a chloramine destruction dose. The chloramine destruction dose will do disinfection very well too. The disinfection dose does not really help much with chloramines, but it does splendid work on assisting chlorine to disinfect the water. The problem with running at a chloramine destruction dose, the higher dose, 24/7, is that you wind up destroying about 25% of chlorine in the water, free chlorine in the water, as well as taking care of the desired combined chlorine, the chloramines. Optimally, and again, talking back to the smart disinfection, the smart dosing principle is that our ultraviolet systems feature 2 set points, which can be controlled via the DCM 502 system. So what we do is we have a low dose set point and a high dose set point. And the DCM, depending on what the combined chlorine reading is that it's reading, it can tell the UV unit to go ahead and run at the low dose or at the higher dosing level. And the obvious advantages of this is we're saving chlorine. If we're saving chlorine, we're saving acid, and if we're saving acid, we're saving bicarb. There's this domino effect that occurs when we save chlorine. The other side of that, we're also saving electricity, and we're also saving the lamp light because we're not burning the lamps as hard as other manufacturers will do with their systems that run at 100% 24/7. So it's real clear that by being able to modulate this, by being smart about how we're applying our UV dose to the water, we're actually more precisely taking care of what we want to take care of, and we're not wasting electricity, we're not wasting chlorine, we're not wasting lamp light. We're doing it in a smart way. We have building management system connectivity. There's an optional module for the control panel for the Dulcadose ultraviolet system that allows us to make a connection with the building management system and put the information from the UV system out onto their network. Now, one of the things that is a sad but true fact about our industry is that not everybody's optimally trained. We have some great operators, and then we basically have some folks underneath these great operators that don't have that same level of expertise or knowledge. So we've tried to not only give the very high-end operators information on the screen to be able to tell how their unit's performing, but we've also given some of these other folks that are more just kind of checkup people, gave them some capabilities to tell when things are running right for them. So 2 things speak to that. First of all is on the back of the wiper carriage on this unit, there's a small Teflon ring that actually will glow. It passes some visible light being emitted off the lamps on the inside. That glow, at just a glance, will say, are my lamps on or off? Easily seen. The other side of that, on the HMI, or the control panel face, the LCD screen on it has a backlight. And we've color-coded that backlight so that it's green when the system's operating just fine. Its backlight turns to yellow when the system is in alert, and then it turns red if the system is in alarm. And so at a glance, a less experienced operator can go ahead and say, okay, are my lamps on? And at a glance, they can see what conditional operation the whole system is in. Is it green? Is it yellow? Is it red? Easily reportable and easily visualized. And the other side on this too is that the Delcados A is extremely easy to maintain because the unit has one side access for all controls, for all internal components come off of one side. So it gives us more flexibility as opposed to our competition, which requires two-sided access to the system in order to properly maintain it, to pull sleeves out, to pull lamps out and whatnot. We have one-sided access, which is, adds more flexibility for installation and enhances the ease of maintenance. Touching on the Log-R system, this is derived out of our industrial cooling tower segment. And to set this up a little bit, what a Log-R does, it's a real-time cutting-edge way to tell if the water is going to be corrosive to a certain type of metal. Now, why is this important? I can't tell you how many times in the past I've talked to operators who are going through big 2 million, 5 million BTU heat exchangers or tube bundles on their systems, simply because the water gets corrosive and nobody really knows about it. And so they're spending thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in equipment costs and repair costs in order to take care of these heat exchangers, these tube bundles that have gone ahead and gone bad because of corrosive conditions. Well, what the Log-R will do is watch that metal and let an operator know when the water becomes corrosive to that certain metal. It won't tell an operator why it's corrosive, it just tells the operator that it is. And this is huge because it at least gives the operator a chance to do something about it. The Log-R can be standalone, as you see here, or it can also be just the sensor assembly can also be plugged into the DCM5 series controllers and run as an extra sensor off of that. Couple points. We have OnSite chlorination systems. These OnSite systems are not salt in the pool. They're not salt pool applications. These are what we would call offline systems. So what we do is we take a tank, make a very high concentration of brine solution, very similar to what a water softener utilizes. And in fact, some of these systems use just plain old water softener salt. Takes that high concentration brine and transforms that brine solution into a batch of sodium hypochlorite, bleach. So as the system makes the bleach, or as your pumping system utilizes the bleach, this system will go ahead and make up the bleach that's being pumped into the pool for disinfection and oxidation purposes. The benefits of an on-site system are multifold in that the product, the solution of the bleach that's manufactured by this system is lower pH than delivered bleach. It's about 10.5 as opposed to 13 for delivered bleach. And again, going back to the smart disinfection, this results in less acid use, which translates into less bicarb use, and also obviously translates to less chemical handling. The other side of this is that the system, when pumping the bleach in, this bleach has less salt byproducts that are left over in that. So normal delivered bleach has a lot of dissolved solids in it that wind up translating into the water as TDS. And our system here, there's less dissolved solids in that bleach, and therefore your TDS doesn't get that rise like it normally would see with delivered bleach. Looking at large facilities like large indoor and outdoor water parks, the parks that are running all year, can realize a relatively quick return on investment over standard bleach delivery costs and use. With all these aspects taken into account, we can probably see for a system that's sized to handle 5, 6, 7 pools out of one bulk tank of bleach, a return on investment, depending on the cost of chemicals that they're currently using within probably about 5 years. And that's a pretty good deal, because anything after that is just completely 100% saved money for the facility. Now with the chemical storage tanks, I really like these. These are a pretty neat product to me, in that we rotomold our own tanks, so we have complete quality control. And these tanks are 100% sealable type, which makes it an ideal companion to the acid fume scrubber. That we can go ahead and attach an AFS to this unit and give the customer a completely fume-free solution for storage and dispensing of their systems. Now, the only downside, if there is a downside for this, is that our tanks are single-walled, and most cases, municipality, estate, whatnot, will require secondary containment. Well, our secondary containment is achieved by placing the tank into a sleeve tank like you see here, like a trough, or you can place our tanks on the catchment pallets that you see frequently. They have like a yellow grating on the top with a black catchment bottom. So that can offer secondary containment. Now, understand this though, is most of the double wall tanks are not completely sealable. They have air gaps between the lips. So some of them will have the ability to pass acid fumes out, whereas ours can be completely sealed. The other benefit too of our tanks is that our tanks come with brass ferrules mounted in them to match up with the footprints of our various dosing pumps, the Concept, the Beta, etc., so that you can mount the tank directly to the pump directly to the top of the tank and offer a nice package solution to the customer of a pumping system along with our controllers. The other exciting part for me is that these tanks are available in colors. So standardly we can do red, blue, yellow, black, and translucent, and we have some areas in the country that are starting to standardize on actually providing a colored tank along with a certain pool product in order to help enhance safety at the location.